And welcome back. In the heart of the South Bronx, where challenges often seem insurmountable, our next guest has forged a path of hope and transformation. She's faced the odds head on, overcoming the struggles of teen pregnancy and a system that's often dismissing those from minority backgrounds. Her journey from a challenging childhood to earning advanced degrees, nothing short of remarkable. And yet, rather than leaving her past behind, she returned to her community with a mission, providing the kind of education to change lives. Here now, we're pleased to have the author of The Fight for Equity in the Bronx, Dr. Elaine Ruiz López, and Dr. Elaine Ruiz López here with us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Daren.
A pleasure to have you on this conversation, because when we talk about the fight for equity, honestly, for yourself, it's been a long-standing battle. But when you talk about equity, I always like to begin with this. People make a differentiation between equity and equality. There's two different things. And your fight was for equity. Explain the difference between both for us.
Well, that's a very interesting question that you pose. I believe that you cannot have equality without equity. Equity in education, equity in housing, equity in healthcare, and how children, are being provided with the resources that they need in order to excel and become productive citizens in society.
And when you look at where you are in the South, in the Bronx, we talk about the fact that there is this educational inequity. From your lens, walk us through how we got to where we are today.
Well, I could begin with my personal story. Born and raised in the boogie down Bronx, the home of salsa and hip hop, during a time where the Bronx was burning. And then, becoming a teenage mom, being pushed out of high school, earning a GED, to then pursuing a degree in teaching and going back to the South Bronx, in the midst of, when the South Bronx looked like a war zone. I had many, examples to draw from, fortunately, that gave me my first awakening in terms of the need to step up and fight for social justice and to not accept, the discrimination, the racism, and the poor quality of education and healthcare. I learned that at a very tender age of 13. My first example of organizations that were fighting against the power structures were the Young Lords Party, who took over Lincoln Hospital, a hospital that I was born in 1956, and that later, the Young Lords Party took it over, and in order to bring national attention to the fact that, there was poor quality health care, and that hospital actually, as you know, gained the reputation of being called the butcher shop.
Right.
They also brought national attention to the poor sanitation conditions, as well as poor conditions in the public school system. I was born and raised on Simpson Street, and I attended elementary school in the infamous, Fort Apache sector, or what was named Fort Apache by that, racist movie that was depicted by Paul Newman at the time. And so I have firsthand experience of what it was like to live in the South Bronx as a child, walking to school across the street from the Fort Apache precinct, and observing my environment and understanding, that there was something seriously wrong with, how myself and others were living and how we were being treated.
Can I jump in for a
So,
second and talk about this inequity? Because when you look at the inequity that you faced as a child, obviously growing up in this inequity, the time, the culture. Now we look at the year 2024, and you could say right there a lot of similarities between then and now, how the inequity exists. From your perspective, how does the inequity really affect our students today as compared to back then?
well, I agree with you. There are many similarities that can be drawn from, when I was attending elementary school and when students now are attending elementary school. So, you know, today we have more of a focus, the public school system and charter schools in particular have more of an intentional focus on assuring that students are receiving an academically rigorous curriculum and that no one gets lost through the cracks. At the very minimum, we know that there are a lot of efforts that are being made to differentiate instruction for students with disabilities and students who are English language learners and who are immigrants to this country. We also know that, you know, uh, the brutality that many members of the community experienced in the 70s, 80s, and 90s is still very present and rising. So I also, as in my 20s and my 30s, I had an opportunity to march alongside of community and social activists, not only demanding bilingual education for immigrant students who are entitled to these services, but also demanding, fair and equitable treatment by, institutions that were in place to support and help the community, such as the police department. So I found myself while working on my master's also, joining the National Congress for Puerto Rican Rights, which was founded by some of the members of the Young Lords Party. And so I joined that organization in the 80s and learned a great deal about speaking truth to power and really what it meant in order to speak, on behalf of others that did not have a voice.
Yeah. And
You
when
know,
you talk about having a voice and others who didn't have a voice, that was kind of like the impetus for your work, that you really became a voice for those who didn't have one and those who needed to have their voice articulated. You took that and decided that you were going to form a charter school, but not without a struggle. So for yourself, pioneering this charter school and creating, talk to us about what it was like to really get there and the road of adversity that was faced in trying to create this charter school.
well, first, to put it into context, today there are approximately 240 charter schools in New York City. 15% of the New York City public school students attend charter schools, so approximately 142,000 students are attending charter schools today. We started the first charter high school in the Bronx in 2006. And it was the intent and the mission that still remains today is to prepare every student for college. Um, the challenges appeared to be insurmountable at the time. And within 6 months of our opening, the power structure, mainly the Department of Education, decided that they did not want our school and tried to shut us down within 6 months of opening. So of course, we fought back. The parents, wanted this school in the community as an alternative to, the violent high schools that students were attending and the high schools that were not graduating Black and brown children. I believe that at the time, the graduation rate in the Bronx may have been 50%. 18 years later, we've been able to graduate we have an average track record of a 95% graduation rate, and 100% of our students who graduate and apply to college are accepted to the college of their choice.
Amazing. And that's a great statistic to go to ask this question about representation in education, because when you have representation in education, getting those numbers that you talked about could be really achievable. But if there's a lack of representation, sometimes we see a lot of our students fall off the boat simply because there is this lack in the classroom, in administration. How important is that representation?
Well, representation matters. So education for us, by us is a quote and a tagline that's used by a coalition that our charter school is also a member of, the Black Latinx Asian Charter Collaborative. Started this organization in 2018. Reverend Al Cockfield, Marian Rocca, Dr. Charlene Reed, Dr. Steve Perry, and others got together and in order to galvanize the power and the potential of the charter school leaders of color, who, like in my case, are leading community-grown charter schools. Not charter schools that are run by charter management organizations, but charter schools that, have roots in the community. So representation matters. And, there is an effort to lift the New York State charter cap on charter schools. There is an effort to fight for fiscal equity for charter schools. Right now, the funding for charter schools is 30% less than what students who attend traditional public schools receive. So charter school leaders have the burden of raising that additional money and figuring it out.
Yeah, pardon me for cutting you on there. I wanted to talk to you about your perspective on charter schools and why you feel it's important that people have the access and the opportunity to attend charter schools.
Absolutely. So charter schools, first and foremost, are public schools. They're schools of choice. They're considered nonprofit. We all had to apply for our 501c3s, but we're a public school. We have to abide by, New York State regulations. We're authorized by the State University of New York Charter Schools Institute. So the charter school concept is to allow parents and students to have choice in the type of school that they attend, an alternative to the New York City public school system. And as a result, it's been very controversial from the inception. There's a great deal of concern that charter schools are undermining the New York City public school system, and in my opinion, charter schools in many sectors have been able to share their practices with traditional public schools, and not to compete, but to show what's possible in terms of providing a quality education where every single student is treated as a gifted and talented student. Every single student is expected to achieve and graduate. I also believe that, it's imperative that, those who are opposed to charter school understand that this is a parent and community choice. There are 142,000 students who attend charter schools in New York City today. And there's a reason for that, and the numbers are growing. And there was a recent study called the Credo study that was a long-term empirical study that shows the remarkable performance and success of charter schools in comparison to other school systems, not only in New York, but nationally as well.
when we look at the fact that so many students have really had the opportunity to excel by having an opportunity to have charter schools, particularly in urban locations. Um, I've interviewed several administrators who said to have a charter school in an urban location really is an accelerator in the life of a student. From your perspective, how do you view charter schools, particularly when it comes to being involved in urban areas? How do you see that future playing out?
Well, I am hopeful, you know, hope, and optimistic that those legislators who are holding back and resisting the inevitable change and the need for charter schools will, come to a place of supporting communities of color, and particularly schools that are led by leaders of color. The research also shows that students who have teachers and principals and administrators of color are doing much better as compared with schools that do not.
And when you look at the future, how do you see things playing out in the future? I mean, obviously, a lot of controversy still surrounds here in New York City. Are you optimistic that we're also going to be able to get over some of these hurdles and really see charter schools full bloom?
I believe that is possible, and a lot of it relies upon the advocacy work of local and national organizations, the advocacy on behalf of the parents and students. Every year and a couple of times a year within the past year, there have been quite a number of protests and advocacy days where busloads of students go up to Albany asking for their voices to be heard, not only on increasing equity, fiscal equity for each charter school student, but also in supporting, a choice, because this is a choice.
It is, it is. And for people who want more information about your book, obviously The Fight for Equity is a great read in terms of having people understand the journey. How do people get in touch with you in terms of finding out more?
Sure. Well, there are a few ways. One is researching. Just going to my book's website, Dr. Elaine Ruiz Lopez.com, and also to purchase the book, it could be easily purchased through Amazon. I'm pleased to say that in 8 weeks, it's become a bestseller on Amazon and #1 in various categories. So I'm very proud of this particular accomplishment. And by the way, all the royalties have been assigned for a scholarship fund to support first-year college students with their tuition, fees, books, et cetera.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a great job there in terms of supporting students. And for yourself, what does it feel like to be able to give back, given the fact that you had to be resilient really to get to where you are, and now knowing that the battle still exists for so many other students? What's that like, being able to give back to help somebody out and also make it over the top?
It's a 360 moment for me, and it's also is part of my purpose. I believe that we all have a God-given purpose, and my purpose was to become an educator and to support young people in achieving their dreams. So it feels very good.
Yeah. And what advice do you have for the community in terms of activism? Because as your life dictates, you were an activist from the jump and had a lot of early intervention in the lives of so many people when it came to education, health inequities, all those things put together. You really were there. What advice do you have for people about getting involved, staying active, and helping somebody to find that voice so that way they can make the impact like you made?
Very good question. So I'll start with the vision that I have for our alumni. Our alumni, are in touch they come back. We have some alumni that are currently working at our charter school. And the message to them is to be the change that they want to see in the world. And that, it is expected that they come back to give back to their community, whether it be as a teacher, a business person, a board member, but certainly, to continue taking the gift and the privilege that they've been given and applying it to improve the lives of others. We exist to improve the lives of others and to serve others. And that is my missive, and it's something that I message to parents as well, not to be afraid to join the fight, because it is a good fight.
Yeah, it is a good fight. How much has the fight changed since COVID? I mean, I know I talk to administrators all the time and teachers who say, listen, we had issues before then. Some things have become further exacerbated as that learning gap for so many of our students has changed simply because of the COVID and the virus.
Yes, well, our charter school and charter schools throughout the city and throughout the country, all schools in general, have had to work harder and smarter when it comes to closing the achievement gaps that were caused, by, the coronavirus pandemic. So it also impacted attendance as well as enrollment in many schools throughout New York City, not just charter schools, but traditional public schools as well. I believe that Chancellor Banks started the school year, at a press conference, speaking about, the under enrollment in its schools. It did have an impact. However, we are bouncing back. And, 2020, we had a graduation. We were one of the few charter schools that remained open in a hybrid model in order to ensure that our scholars did not fall, behind. So I'm proud to say that, we've had a graduation. Of course, that 2020 graduation was inside of a tent, on the campus at the University of Mount St. Vincent outdoors. But we had a graduation nonetheless.
Ah, beautiful time, beautiful time. For yourself, what's the highlight of your career so far?
Is being able to see the alumni come back and work in various positions at our charter school, as well as, keeping in touch with the alumni and knowing what amazing things that they're doing. We have alumni that already have, completed their master's degrees and are working in different professions throughout, the city. The highlight for me annually is the graduation, because I didn't have a graduation. I didn't have a high school graduation because I was pushed out of high school. And so every graduation is very affirming. So it's a big celebration.
Yeah. And when we look at today's student, what can you give us as a nugget that maybe we should be paying attention to that in the lives of today's students that maybe the wider public is not so privy to, or we tend to overlook? What are we missing in the blind spot when it comes to today's student?
Well, today's student, what comes to mind is that, the attention span is a little bit shorter. And I think it's as a result of social media. So you have very often, in order to convey a message, it has to be in sound bites, because having very long explanations doesn't work as well. However, we have to, develop our students and be intentional about, promoting critical thinking skills and promoting focus and concentration, because of all of the distractions that we have today, that they have today. It makes it much harder for them to focus, on a course of study.
And that course of study is definitely needed. Well, I should say not definitely. The course of study is definitely rigorous. Let's put it like that. And the rigorous course of study that so many students face today is challenging, and it requires a lot of attention. But with so many issues and the inequities that, as we talk about in the show, the inequities that people face, that sometimes being able to deal with the rigor of study is second. It's second to life. It's second to having to, navigate family. It's second to thinking about the job that I have to do. And particularly, I'm not talking about a lot of colleges and universities, but when you look at, city universities and SUNY schools and community colleges, these are all things that really a student has to contend with.
Absolutely, and it's a real thing, right? Having to, you know, um, after a full day of studying, you know, uh, leaving to a job, sometimes two jobs, it's very challenging, and I really admire and respect the student that is doing what they can to support their families who may not have, the income that is needed in order to survive in this city.
Yeah, yeah. And once again, for people who want more information, her book is The Fight for Equity in the Bronx. We've got Dr. Elaine Ruiz López, who's been sharing with us a little bit of her journey, and not just the journey for herself, but students. It's a journey of community, education, racism, social justice, all those things wrapped up in one. Thank you for the work that you've done. It's a great body of work. And also thank you for the work at writing the book. I mean, I know it was a long time coming, but you've finally made it across the finish line there.
Thank you so much, Darren. Thank you.
All righty. Dr. Elaine,
Yes.
yes, Ruiz Lopez, our guest, and thank you.